When and why would you do a bleeds off takeoff, or PAX off takeoff as they call it in the world of Airbus? Joe Munoz, OneStepPrep.com, OneStepPrepAcademy.com, home of your favorite type rating center where we issue 737 A320 types, FAA ATPs. We got the ATP CTP course. Can't wait to work with you here. Let's get into it. A bleeds off takeoff basically is the following. We want to remember that the engines provide bleed air, compressed air, for varying receiving units, everything from hydraulic systems to pressurization, air conditioning, pneumatics, what have you. And so when we go to take off, it is possible if we're at here's some examples, a high elevation airport, high density altitude, wind shear potentially in the area. Okay, there's wind shear advisories in effect. We want maximum engine power, and by tapping bleed air, unfortunately, that does cut into some of your performance. So when we need or may need maximum performance, we would want to take advantage of this bleeds off takeoff, and by doing so, we would maximize that output from the engines. Now, in the world of Boeing, which is originally where I started and later transitioned to Airbus, we call it a bleeds off takeoff because we literally turn off the engine bleed air switches. And in the world of Airbus, they call it PAX off, which really threw me for a loop because sometimes the PAX are still on despite the fact that we're doing a quote unquote PAX off takeoff. Now, how does that work? Well, what we're trying to really do is understand that the PAX are being offloaded from the engines, and therefore there is no more bleed load, bleed demand by the PAX on the engines, and we can make this be the case by either A, turning the PAX off literally and having a takeoff phase of flight with no air conditioning, or you could run the APU and have the APU powering your PAX. So effectively you would have the PAX being powered off of the APU and offloaded from the engines, but very much the PAX are still running in that case. Now, on the 737, they call it a bleeds off because literally we turn the bleed air switches off. Now, it's important to understand there is a small variance when we use the APU in terms of how these valves open and close. In the 737, when I turn on the APU bleed, the engine bleed valves do not necessarily close automatically. And we don't want to have both the APU bleed and the engine bleeds on at the same time with anything more than idle thrust because it could create a potential back pressure. There's an amber light that says dual bleed. We talk about it in our system course online as well as here. Anyway, basically it wouldn't be a good deal. So in the Airbus world, it takes care of this potential hazard for us automatically. When we put the APU bleed on, the engine bleed valves close, and by having the APU bleed on and powering the PAX off of the APU, the engine bleed valves close automatically, whereas in the Boeing we would have to close them manually. So it's a lot of talk, Joe. What are you getting to? What I'm getting to is when do we do a bleeds off or a PAX off takeoff? When we need maximum performance, which would be the case of probably wind shear advisories in effect, high density altitude, a high elevation airport. These are some times when I'm looking to commit to a bleed off or a PAX off takeoff. And ultimately what we're trying to do is remove or minimize the bleed air demand that we are placing on the engines so that all that thrust is ultimately available and all that bleed air is available within the engines to produce the most amount of power available. All right, so hope that makes sense. You guys know where to find this. Want to enjoy your friends and training program success at OneStepPrep.com. We'll see you here.